going on? It is May 26th. It's a Tuesday. It's the DRF Players Podcast. Everyone's in house today. Peter Thomas Fornatale is here. DRF Tournament Editor Mike Hogan's here at DRF Formulator. I'm Matt Bernier. Gentlemen, we had 4 PH races. Let's get the housekeeping out of the way first before we dive into it. It's going to be kind of a free-form day.
Good plan. I like it. I like free-form.
The 4 PH races, you had the Nassau, you had the stake from Monmouth. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of it.
The Majestic Light.
The Majestic Light, thank you. The Franz Valentin from out in California at Santa Anita, as well as the Snow Chief. The Nassau was at the top of the lane. I mean, it was about 17 horses wide. Eventually we had a bit of a number. I think a 19-1 shot.
19-1.
That ended up getting the job done. I think all of us swinging a miss there. Yes.
Yeah, my horse. I keep doing this, and it's a valuable lesson in contests, and I don't know what the answer is. So I don't know what the lesson is. It's a valuable thing to pay attention to in these contests where you don't know what the prices are going to be. And I get seduced by the big morning line, even though I know it's probably inaccurate. I'm thinking, well, the horse will probably still be an overlay. No.
Dan and I had talked on live the thought of when you think that there is a bogus morning line, not only should you make your own value line, but maybe it helps make your own morning line too.
It's a very interesting idea.
Just unless you think that the line is stout. Like I very rarely will ever question a line Eric Donovan here in New York makes for Naira. I think he's the best that there is. Then again, I see some other lines. I'm not going to name people or places, but you look at it, you go, come on now.
Yeah, no chance.
There's no shot of that. Mathematically, there's no chance of that.
Right.
Literally, again, I think people know where I'm going with that one. Mathematically, it adds up to about 200 points. Like, it can't happen. You can't have 7 3-1 shots. But, I think that's kind of something going forward, too, because I brought up the idea that it affects contest play. When you're trying to project down the road and think, okay, this horse in the 7th race at Belmont, we're going to be 3/4 of the way through the contest. If I'm looking at a horse that I hope is going to be in that 8 or 10-1 range, and on the line opens up at, is really, going to go off at 5-2, but they've made him 8-1 on the line, that makes it a little bit difficult for you to project forward. I mean, obviously things are going to happen.
At least in the live format or in your typical on-site contest, you have that ability to see the line and adjust.
Right.
The horse in question here is a Resistivity, who I was seduced by at 20-1, ends up, I don't know, going off at what?
7s.
6.5, 7s.
Yeah.
I mean, at that price, you don't have the opportunities to maybe take I'm not saying I would have backed the winner.
No.
But, maybe you take another look at that longer half of the uncoupled entry at 20-1. But in the all-in format, in the public handicapper format, those picks are in, and you just sort of grit your teeth. Of course, I got a good run for my money.
Yeah.
You guys were absolutely right about the pace in there. I was incorrect. I thought it would be. I thought it maybe would set up for somebody in the first half of the field, but it only takes a couple of horses. It really only takes one horse to make an unsustainably hot pace if it's the right situation. And that race kind of fell apart, and that led to the result.
Now, she wasn't very good, but I don't think it helped that Winning Rhythm was so forwardly placed.
No, I was shocked by that.
Yeah.
I was shocked by that.
And like I said, I bet her in that spot just because of the price. I didn't put a pick in for PH because I was torn between her and Overheard, or Overhead, Overheard. I don't even remember at this point. Mind is complete jello. But when I
Triple
saw
Crown season is upon
yeah,
us.
right, exactly. But when we were watching it and she was so forwardly placed, I go, oof, wow, I don't know if that's necessarily the right call.
No, yeah, I was surprised. She's not one that's usually that close to the lead. And from an odds standpoint, Pete, I think the morning line, it was when I saw the race, I thought, some things are going to change here. As it turned out, your horse and my horse essentially flipped, because my horse was 6-1 morning line. Winning Rhythm went off about 14 or 15 to 1.
15, yeah, when it was all said and
Yeah,
done.
those prices, I absolutely. That is who I would have played if it was a regular. If it was a regular contest. I respected the case that you guys made, and actually I think on PH had Winning Rhythm second. So 14 or 15 on Winning Rhythm, really?
Yeah.
15, yeah,
Wow.
when it was all said and done.
And then, I would say that's one to go ahead, go in Formulator, make your trip note, go in your horse watch on DRF.com, and you can say, look, another excuse for this horse potentially just being too close to the pace. Maybe next time you can bet Winning Rhythm back, or did you have any?
No, I mean, I got a feeling that she kind of is what she is, and I love her still. I mean, I'm always going to be drawn into her, but I'd be anxious to see. I can go and look what that figure came back, but would it shock me if she ran her typical 85? No. Yeah. I just think that she kind of is what she is.
I just wonder if they were experimenting something a little bit in the first start with the new barn.
It's possible. Keep her closer so she doesn't have to come from out of the clouds.
I don't know if I would unload on her next time necessarily, but I'd be curious.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I want to do I think the most important talking point last of the four, so we'll go the other way.
I like it.
The Snow Chief, all hell broke loose, never a doubt, wins, pays $40-some-odd on paper. Illman and I both said this is a race that I think anything could happen. Anything did happen.
That was a good read.
Anything else for you guys to add?
Pace-wise, it played out kind of the way I thought it would, which was the stretch-out Richard's Boy taking a lead and folding. I didn't expect him to be there late, and I thought it set up well for a closer, but I just didn't have that one.
Right. And, yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to add to that.
Yeah, was that who was on the who somebody was dueling with Richard's Boy in there, right? Or
Zinvor, I believe.
Right.
Who was the favorite.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Who ended up being favorite.
that didn't end up working well. The Franz Valentine, however you want to pronounce it, like John Valentin.
More like Bobby Valentine.
That was exactly. You're right.
Get your baseball references right, guys.
The Heat du Jour. I still, we talked about it on live because I was in kind of an odd spot where I thought she was going to be about 4-1, and when she was 6 and 7 for a long time as the second choice, I almost got cold feet thinking like, is she cold as the second choice at 6 or 7-1 or whatever the scenario is? She went off at 5, I think, when it was all said and done. That was my big play of the weekend. I don't think I was wrong in hindsight watching it again. I thought she was going to make a move. She was essentially hand in hand with Go West Marie. The difference was Nakatani got in behind a wall of horses. Go West Marie took the overland route, and she went on to win. Am I disappointed that I lost $100? Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think it was necessarily the wrong play.
No, I mean, that's the thing about this game. If you, after a result where you lose, if you assume that just because you lost, you did something wrong, or just because you won, you did something right, you are going to get your head kicked in. This is a game where you need to evaluate the decisions that you make, not the outcomes that you get. And you always have to look at this relative to prices on the board. The same thing for me there. That was the race with My Monet, right?
Yep.
Who I thought ran terrific at the price.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Had the lead in the stretch and ended up not being good enough. No shocker there, but I feel good about that. If I can pick a horse at a price who fires, and there's a lot of different ways to define fires, and I'm pretty liberal about how I use it. But for example, I mean, the biggest thing for me about a horse who fires is they're in the race with a shot, like when the real running starts. So maybe a closer who's at the pace call and within a couple of lengths, or a front runner who has the lead for a long time. I'm obviously a lot happier if they win, but I'm not going to beat myself up. Right,
you had a chance.
You're in the hunt.
Right,
and if you can pick horses at prices who are in the hunt, you're doing something right, and you should be able to get where you want to be as long as you bet smart and allow the long run to play out.
That's right.
Yeah, the other definition I like to use is looks like a potential winner at some point in the race.
Yeah, same thing.
To use the Preakness as an example, Taylor Verve ran second, never looked like a winner at any point in the race, whereas Divining Rod, perhaps.
Oh, he looked great.
Yeah.
Especially when you factor in the break that he had.
Sure.
He ran, I agree, Divining Rod definitely fired, looked probably a little better. I mean, to me, my evaluation of that would be to upgrade it a little bit, given the trip, the start really, and making a real run, trying to win the race, not just running for second. Taylor Verve was running for second, got second. To me, considerably less impressive than the third place finisher.
The fourth race was
a little Preakness tangent.
the Majestic Light. It was actually the second race in chronological order, but the big story is Red Vine. He goes and wins. First and foremost, the big story is the field was absolutely decimated.
What was that?
I don't know.
You see that sometimes in maiden races where they're like afraid of the Pletcher 2-5 shot. This wasn't people being afraid of Red Vine.
No, because this is very similar. I almost wonder if it has something to do with the track. I really do.
Some of it could be that. Some of it just, between Monmouth and Belmont, there are a lot of options for horses at that price range going long, at this time of year. And so I think they allow a lot of trainers to cross-enter horses, and then they end up scratching. And, half of that field showed up or is showing up at Belmont later this week. And, I mean, we saw it with the Monmouth Sprint race that AP Indian won a couple weeks ago.
Same type of deal, right?
Same type of deal. A
Same
lot
deal.
of them were cross-entered in Diablo, and
They got to get a handle on that because they're putting these races in there with the big multis. The Pick 5 down there is a fairly popular bet, and then you get this race that should be carded as the third, as the 11th.
Well, here's the stat from the race. For me, from a betting standpoint, there were more scratches than horses that ran.
Yeah. How often do you see that on a non-weather day?
Right.
Without a weather change, without a surface change, more scratches than entries. Runners.
So we only had 5 horses go. I thought when they broke, the value was Storm and Monarco at 6-1. He didn't pick his feet up. Red Vine wins. What was the number? 106?
106.
What do you two think about him?
I think that in what could go down in history as the most incredible prediction I've ever heard, 3 races down, 13 to go for Red Vine to equal Cigar's streak.
I hope that's tongue-in-cheek.
It is tongue-in-cheek. Firmly planted-cheek. But it is impressive that Mike did take this horse who had never run on dirt and said it would be as if it was it wasn't like he was predicting Red Vine was going to be Cigar, but it was pointing out how crazy it would be, but here's a horse with the equivalent amount of dirt breeding on paper, and then he's gone on and
what did you think overall, though?
I thought it was an impressive performance, but against what I don't know. I mean, Valid doesn't seem like he did his lead business again, and I just don't think he's there anymore.
Mike, what did you think about it? Because you've been kind of the Red Vine guy.
Well, by default, I guess. I didn't realize.
I don't know. You mentioned him in the same breath with Cigar. You're the Red Vine guy.
That's true. I mean, he looked impressive beating a field that didn't seem to be much aside from Valid, who, as we've mentioned, doesn't really want to change leads late. I don't know if he would have won if he had changed leads this race. Red Vine just seemed a little bit better, and he had a great ride from Joe Bravo, who somehow was able to get to the rail from one of the outside posts. I mean, granted, it's a 5-horse field, but he got an incredible trip, and as soon as the rest of the horses pressing Valid gave it up, he was ready to just take over and pull away late. I don't know what to take from there, and I'm guessing he's going to show up in a graded stake next out, and depending on what the price will be, if he's a short price, which I imagine he might be, undefeated now on dirt, seems to have done nothing wrong, the big 106. He's one I'd probably want to play against next out, but quietly be rooting for him to win 13 months.
I immediately after the race, I said I really hope that they judge this off of Valid when they make the number, because we know what Valid is.
They did, and Valid improved.
Right.
That's the thing. From a buyer standpoint, Valid got a 102, which was an improvement.
But that's the thing. I mean, look, anybody with half a nut in their head knows that that's not.
Well, right. Yeah.
But a horse like that with that kind of tactical advantage is supposed to run so much better than what Valid did.
Oh no, I don't agree with that. I just think Valid is what he is.
I think he was below himself even. I think he's just going.
I thought he ran his race. I really did. He actually changed to his right lead late in the stretch when we started joking, saying, "No, he's tired." That's the only reason he changed over to his right lead, the proper, on his right side. I got to be honest. I mean, I just think it's a completely dressed up number. I wasn't that impressed. I said, "All right, do it against real horses now."
Right.
I mean, look, Super Lucky was all in on the backside. He ran third.
I liked him in the race.
Someone
had
to
run third.
Yeah,
I mean, Super Lucky was coming off a big number 2, but that was the biggest number he'd earned in his life, and it was off a third place finish.
I think even if nothing else, if he just shows up and you're gonna have to test him a little bit at some point. He won't be a favorite. He'll be a short price, and if nothing else, it just helps.
Well, it all depends. I mean, he's going to be very carefully spotted, I would think. Still, I don't think
he was very carefully spotted in this.
Well, I think that's. I initially had looked at that and said, "This is everything I need to know." Christoph is running him here. He clearly doesn't really know what he's got.
He's an older horse, so it's not as if he was a 3-year-old, and he wanted to take a stab to see what he's got. I mean, he figures, okay, let's make some money and see where the ceiling is and find a spot for him to win.
What are the possibilities for him to go next?
I have no idea. I mean, you think about maybe this.
Well, it's too soon.
No, it's too soon.
Way
The
too
Mets
soon
way too
and
quick.
way too over the head.
Maybe the Suburban going 10. I mean, boy, but that's a big ask. After that, we kind of mapped it out.
At Monmouth,
we mapped it out, and we said we thought he would stay at Monmouth, throughout. Stay down there. You've got the Island. You've got there's another graded stake down there, whatever it is. At some point, you're going to have to try a bigger spot. And we both kind of agreed that the Kelso would seem to be an early, not early, but in the grand scheme of things, a 1-turn mile at Belmont. If he does well there, maybe the Breeders' Cup Mile, on a dirt mile, not the grass, dirt mile, and then maybe a year-end goal of like the Cigar Mile.
Yeah.
I don't think he's, and I think that's probably still ambitious, but I mean, you've got to map out something.
My gut is he'll look great at the Island.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
so.
yeah. I mean, down there, again, I don't think he's going to face Valid. He'll face Braidster, or like grade 2, grade 3. Grade 2 is probably being generous. Like a Pants on Fire will show up there.
Wasn't Island a grade 3 anyway?
Yeah, it is. So. But I think that's where he belongs, and that's why we always go back to like the figures.
Hey, if we're gonna get up to 16 wins, we got to get a
got to get him somewhere. Got to get him somewhere, right? Absolutely.
Sorry, you were saying about the figures.
No, but I think
Cigar had to rattle off a few first before.
The figure part, like a 106, that puts you in the sort of ballpark of a grade 1. Well, guess what? I don't think you're a grade 1.
Yeah, I was even more negative about Valid than you, so I'm in your
Yeah,
camp.
right. I know. I just thought Valid ran his race. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that.
You might be right. I just felt like when he was really good, again, this is just visually, when he was really good, he would have shown more than that, and that this is to me like 5 or 10 points off his best race was my read. So that would
even less, right? It would take more away from
that
Red
takes
Vine.
Red Vine down to a 100, 102 par for like a grade 3.
Yeah, no,
which
I'm
is
with
kind of
you
where
there.
I think he is right now.
Let's go transition. PH is over for now. We'll talk about it again on Friday. Let's do quick tournament talk. You've got an interview with Eric Moomey. After that, we'll come back and we'll just kind of wrap. I've got some stupid little fun thoughts that I just want to.
We love stupid fun thoughts.
This is what happens when you're in week 2 of the 3-week period between race A and race B. So let's do some tournament talk.
Absolutely. So big news in the NHC Tour this last weekend. We teased it there with mentioning Eric Moomey's name. Eric got his second outright win in a Tour event. He'll now be, I think, into third on the Tour standings, but this is a looming boldly third. If you're Ryan Flanders, if you're Jonathan Kinchin, if you're John Nichols, if you're any of the other folks up at the top of the NHC Tour, you're saying this guy again. Because Moomey at this point, he won the Tour last year. At this point, do you know how many points he had?
0.
0.
Wow.
His first points last year were in the Belmont contest. So we know he can finish strong. Nobody, in terms of online play, there are other people who are great and at his level, but you can't say that anybody's better than Moomey in terms of understanding how to win online contests. And he's worked hard to improve his game the last few years to where he's a lot better in the on-site events, and even had success last year winning a live bankroll event at Monmouth, which actually he had to go down there to win the Tour, and he did it.
Right.
And this guy, he's got the chops, so you don't want to see him up there in the top 5 if you're those guys. So he's going to be a major threat for the rest of the way. I wanted to sit down with him and get some of his thoughts, so we'll throw it now to my interview with Eric Moomey. I'm here on Tournament Talk this week with Eric Moomey. Eric, you're last year's NHC champ, and over the weekend you made a big move to defend your title. How are you feeling today, Memorial Day?
Yeah, I'm feeling real good. Had a nice weekend on NHC qualified, so that's always a good way to kick off the weekend.
Now, last year at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had very few tour points coming into June. Is that right?
Yeah, my first tour points was with the Belmont Challenge in the end of June, and I had a couple tournaments online that I played, but other than participation points, I didn't have anything.
And at what point last year did you think, hey, this tour is something I'm going to make a big run at?
Yeah, really, when I won the Belmont Handicapping Challenge, that gives you a lot of points for finishing first of a on-site event, and so I had a two-part goal. First part was to try to capture the $10,000 mid-year, and then see where I was from there. And I ended up think I played in about 9 or 10 tournaments, and I got points in, I think, 6 of them.
So at that point, it became obvious to make the run for the year. For folks who don't know, on July 31st, the top 5 people on the tour get $10,000. You got to be feeling pretty good about your chances to end up in the top 5 for the first half, though your competition this year is pretty steep. What would you say your chances are to end up in the top 5 by the end of July?
Yeah, I think my chances are pretty good. One of the key things was I was able to claim a second place at a tournament in Las Vegas earlier in the month at Treasure Island, and that's pretty important, given that one of your scores has to be from an onside event.
Absolutely. You were going back and forth there with Rich Goodall. I wish I'd been on hand to witness that battle, and it sounds like he just got the upper hand at the end. That would have been huge with the winner's bonus this year to get a win in an on-site. I mean, it certainly seems safe to say that whoever wins this tour overall is going to probably need to win an on-site event. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say you'll probably need to win at least one large on-site event. There's not too many of those. Belmont is one of those coming up, and I think there's a few more later in the year.
You will be defending your title at Belmont, I presume?
Well, I don't know. It lands on Father's Day, so I'm trying to figure out what my plans are, and either way, there'll be opportunities throughout the year. So
whether it's there or somewhere else, you'll be in the mix, I'm sure, at some point for that honor. So I have to ask, at the beginning of the year, Jonathan Kinchin was the big story in the contest world, but coming out of his amazing performance at the NHC and then going on an incredible run of tournament play. And he's not the only one who started off the year hot. Big John Nichols has had some impressive finishes. Ryan Flanders actually coming into this weekend first in the NHC Tour. How much did these other players' successes, players in your peer group too, interestingly enough, how much did they inspire you to defend your title, or are you playing it exactly the same as you would have?
Yeah, well, first off, some amazing players you mentioned, some new names coming into the fold, and they certainly have figured it out quickly. And so hats off to them. It's hard to say, there's a long ways for the year to say who will finish on top, but certainly very strong competition. Mine was a little different. Last year, when I hit Belmont, I chose to go for it. This year, my tact was a little different. I was curious if I could attack it right from the get-go and end up with the title. We'll see what happens overall, but either way, it'll be a fun year.
Oh, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of great action. It sounds like your plan isn't exactly set in stone as to which events you'll tackle. You're going to let real life determine your course a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. Everyone has to identify their balance in how they play these tournaments. And there's some good online opportunities, and mix in a few, on-sites that you think you have success at. And, whether I hit, I won't hit all of them, but, I'll certainly be in the mix. And I look forward to, to playing with my competition and see where I end up.
Have you changed your play much between last year and this year? Are you doing the same things, or do you continue to evolve as a tournament player?
Absolutely, I'm involved. I am evolving my play. One of the questions that I've always tackled with and tried to work on is, you'll find in a lot of competitions, because I do like long shots. So, what happens if I hit a long shot on the first race of a contest? What is your future play look like through the remainder of the contest? And I've been putting a lot of focus in that area. When I play an NHC tournament, I've already earned my entries, so it's kind of a tournament within a tournament, because I'm actually shooting for a first place finish, even though some of my competition would be happy with a second or third place finish. So it actually, for me, it makes it a little easier. and I'm certainly evolving. I'm still pretty new in this game. I've been doing it for about 3 years now, so just changing as I go.
What's the biggest change between last year's tour run and this year's in terms of your approach to contest play? Don't give away the store, but something you can share with us.
I think it's overall confidence. You have to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And one thing that I do this year is I visualize how I'm going to win the tournament. And so I know where I'm going to look for my prices, and I know where I'm going to go shorter. And I think that might be a little different than in prior years. In prior years, I might have done some more, stabbing as it were, just hoping to hit something. And this year, I'm a little more tactical in my play.
The two words that came up when I was discussing you with Rich Goodall were fearless and aggressive. And I thought that Saturday's NHCQ contest was a good example of that. Coming right out of the box and reaching for a cap horse in the first race with that horse, Frazzle. Why did you play Frazzle?
Yeah, that was, that to me, that one looked like a wide open race. And, he's one that stuck out to me. I was hoping he could take it on the front end. It was interesting. He actually didn't start on the front end, but he did make his way up there anyways. And, sometimes on those grass races you can, a lot of times you look from behind, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes they can grab it on the front end.
And then from there you nabbed another long price, and then at the end you were in, I guess, the fortunate position where you could play sort of the obvious favorites and still have a shot at that top spot. Talk to me about your mindset going into those last two races, the end game on Saturday's contest.
Yeah, it was interesting because that second price horse that I hit, that wasn't my original selection. My original selection was a 3 horse, and I was expecting to get 6, 7 to 1, and he kept floating down. I think it went off at like 5 to 2, and so I said, well, that's not going to work, and so I looked elsewhere, and I also like the 6, and the 6 kept drifting up in price. I said, well, this makes it the decision, and boy, he sure had a lot of horse on him. Coming around, he was kind of bottled up, but you could tell even the announcer was saying he had a lot in him. And then going into I needed like 40 cents. I was 40 cents behind the leader, and I said, well, I don't need a whole lot there, and let's not play it silly, and let's see if I can work my way up in position, which I did. And then in the last one, I was just like, well, there was an obvious favorite, and obviously I was vulnerable to every other horse, and I just decided to let folks win it honestly, and take the favorite out of the equation.
I like it. The horses in question here were Fake Dreams at Monmouth's 9th race, and then the two short prices late, or the one at Santa Anita in the final race was Go West Marie. So some nice picking there on Saturday. Excellent game theory at work. That idea that the long price in the mythical money format, that long price early is worth so much more than the long price late, because of course late on, famously in these mythical money contests, you have people who'll be playing that horse just because it's the price. To play it in the first race, you really need to like the horse and understand the sort of game theory, the idea behind why the long shots are so valuable early on. Is that a typical strategy for you these days, to be really, if you can find the right race, to really go for it early on in the contest?
Well, that is certainly a strategy. My personal strategy, and it's all about statistics for me. So one thing I've noted is the East Coast tracks, for whatever reason, I'm much better at. Belmont, Monmouth, particularly. If you go and look at some of my wins, my Belmont handicapping challenge win, I had 3 long shot winners in Monmouth, nothing at Belmont, even though you had to play predominantly at Belmont. and I'm pretty weak on West Coast tracks, and that's where you always finish up. You always finish up with Santa Anita, with some of the West Coast near the end of the day, and that. So for me, it's important to get in position early, and for whatever reason, I find it harder to find bombs out on the West Coast.
And there are plenty of them, so that's definitely something interesting. It's not, I wouldn't say the contest races out there are typically chalkier. That's just a very interesting idea that you've gotten from handicapping yourself. Let me ask you this last question, and then we'll send it back to the guys on the podcast here. When you look at your competitors, how much work have you done evaluating their tendencies? I know when we spoke for the winning contest player, you had mentioned that handicapping the other players was a big part of your game. How much of, if any, of that have you been doing on the tour so far this year, and what's maybe something you've learned?
Yeah, I would say that's close to 50% of my strategy. So I get very familiar with with the players that are out there. Fortunately for me, there's several of them that that are successful week in and week out, and so you don't necessarily have to look at the entire field. You can figure out which ones are There's some people that are, when you're at the top, they're at the top right there with you, and there's some people that when you're not doing when they're at the top, you're never at the top. And so my focus is to when I'm up there, who am I competing with that happen to use similar strategies that I'm using, and really to focus in on that. It's funny, Rich Goodall and I play, fairly similarly, and boy, was that tough. You would think it'd be easy, but I was in the lead by a small margin, and I could have thrown darts and done better than try to figure out what he was going to do. He's skilled, and he knows me better than I know myself, I think. And, so I give him a lot of credit. He didn't win that on luck. He won that with skill, and so I give him all the credit in the world for that one.
That amazes me that you say that 50% of your success, you believe, comes down to your ability to know what other people are going to do. Give me a little bit more on that. I mean, how can it be that important?
Yeah, I think, well, first, you got to know what you're going to do and what you're comfortable with, and where you can, take prices within the day and where you can get into position. And I will tell you that if there's certain people, if they're ahead of me, that I'm, because I know what they're going to pick. And so let's say I like that 6 horse, that one that was at Monmouth. Well, I can also list 10 people that would also like that horse. I know how they play, and so I'll look on the leaderboard and say, I got to get above all those 10. Otherwise, I can't play that horse if that's what I'm trying to do. And so, so specifically, I try to figure out what each person is going to play, and then I look where I am relative to them. So I might actually select a favorite, if I'm just behind someone, just to inch up ahead of them coming into the race that I like.
That's great. What a great example of how you look at the world and how different it is from everybody else, and that's no doubt a big part of your success. Eric, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Hey, thanks so much. I look forward to wrestling with folks for the rest of the year, and we'll look forward to where everyone comes out.
Sounds good.
You mentioned he's got the pedigree. Eric Moomey, he's looming, he's waiting to pounce. And it's still early, really, in the grand scheme of things. We're not even into June yet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the first half, there are awards for the first half, and that'll be an interesting race to follow. That July 31st, if you're in the top 5, you get $10,000.
Right.
So there's a bunch of people in contention for those honors, and that'll be a fun little mini showdown that I'll be following on the blog. But this race, and I predict it should be a race to the wire between the folks who are up there now and very easily some more new challengers. It's going to be fun. I've enjoyed stepping up my coverage of the tour this year.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Please.
And obviously nothing personal here.
Yeah.
if you, right now, going forward, you're a casino in Las Vegas, you only can have 3 betting interests. And it is your top 3 of Kinchin, Flanders, Moomey.
Okay.
Give me the favorite, the second favorite, and the third favorite.
I think you got to make Jonathan the favorite. I think he might have recently switched from being an odds-on favorite to a slightly odds-against favorite.
So we're saying 7-5?
Yeah, 6-5, 7-5, somewhere in there. And the reason is that he doesn't even yet have an on-site score. And it's not because he's not good at on-site tournaments. It's that he has smartly been playing to win. And when you play to win, a lot of the times you're going to finish at the very top or you're going to finish at the very bottom.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he's been finishing at the bottom, but it's because he's playing the right way, because he sees the long game and understands that you're going to need that win to get there. So he actually has a pretty solid tactical advantage. Also, as we've discussed with him many times, he has the advantage of having flight benefits. His mom was a flight attendant. He'd go anywhere in the country.
For free.
For free.
For free, people. Free.
I thought it was $20.
Oh,
I think it is $20.
Sorry.
I think Mike is right. I think it's 20.
A couple drinks, right?
So he's got that advantage as well. And then I think, no disrespect to Ryan Flanders, who I really respect, but having talked to him and understanding that his travel schedule is a little more limited, and knowing that Moomey is the defending champ, I'd probably put him the second choice. Gosh, I can't even hang a number on it, but it can't be much higher than, I don't know.
9-5?
No, it's long. I think it's still a little, just to make the math work, I got to go a little longer.
Well, I was going to see, now this is where this was going to sound disrespectful, but I was going to think 6-5, 9-5, 10-1, 12-1, or is it still more evenly spaced than that?
My just gut numbers would be to go like 3-1 Moomey, and maybe like 8-1 Flanders.
All right.
8-1, 9-1. Give him about a 10% chance, just because he's shown what a good player he is. He's shown how he can get hot. And he's a Southern California guy. He gets hot at Surfside one weekend.
I was going to say, and it's a totally different ballgame.
Pulls a Brent Sumja, finishes first, second, and first in 3 events at Surfside like Brent Sumja did 2 years ago when he won. He is not to be taken lightly either.
This was good exercise for you on the
I
fly.
know,
I like
I know.
that. That was good. That was good.
Somebody will be offended with the number I hung
Again,
on.
nothing personal. It's
Jonathan will say, you made me odds against, man? What's going on?
4-5. All right, so obviously stay in touch with that. See what goes on. We've got some contests coming up on the weekend, too.
Absolutely. Check out nhcqualify.com and drfqualify.com for that info. I always like to mention, folks, these DRF Qualify contests to get into our live bankroll events at Santa Anita and Gulfstream, they are such a great way to cut your teeth in the live bankroll format on what essentially, you basically turn it into a free roll. If you could spend your $80 or $90 and win your, for Santa Anita, this next one, I think it's going to be a $5,000 entry fee, $4,000 live bank, $1,000 to the entry fee. You can go there. I mean, the best example, our buddy Billy Blake,
Billy,
who was qualified 2 different times now for Santa Anita. He goes out there, he takes a couple of shots, doesn't go so well. He still walks with.
You have a good time too for free, more or less.
Absolutely, and he walks with 2,000.
Right. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, it's pretty tremendous. It's a way live bankroll contests offer you an ability to win money without necessarily even doing great in the tournament. So check it out. The best way to do it is on drfqualify.com, where you can get in for $80, $90, or $100 depending on the week and the contest.
All right. Contest side out. Now we're into, it's a little bit of Belmont talk, but it's more just kind of wrapping.
I'm excited to see what you have here.
Because I've got some brewing things, and the news this morning only plays into it even more for me. Okay, so let's start off with Palace Malice. He's out of the Metropolitan Handicap. We're not surprised, are we? I'm not surprised.
No. When you missed the first race, we said it, and we said it when they announced the schedule. It's like when you say this, you're sort of letting us know if anything deviates from this, it's probably more than meets the eye. It's more than meets the eye. What are the odds we see this horse run again?
Well, now Pletcher, apparently, according to Mike Welsh's Twitter, right, has said that it was simply that the race came up too soon. Now, whether we roll our eyes or not, that's what Pletcher said.
Right.
Now, there's a part of me that doesn't necessarily think it's horse related, and there's a part of me that thinks it has to do with another horse in his barn.
Oh.
Now, Illman and I had a big discussion, I think it was last Thursday on Live, about what do you do with competitive edge? Do you run him in the Woody Stevens 3-year-old 7 furlongs? Or do you run him in the Met where you're getting an allowance with weight, you're going a one-turn mile, you're proving at a one-turn mile? I think a lot of people all along, Pletcher all along, I think Pletcher's best horse in his barn is this horse. Now he's got 2 screws in his leg, so obviously you don't know, fragile and whatnot, but I think there's more to do with Palace Malice. Sure, I don't think he looked good in that comeback race, and you're not going to just throw him to the wolves. I would be very, very intrigued. I think there's much more of a chance now that this horse runs against the older horses.
Competitive edge in the Met Mile. With the defections that have happened in this race, starting with Shared Belief and coming through Palace Malice here, it's starting to look like you take a shot.
And when it comes out on Saturday morning, that now all of a sudden, I think, the minute they came out and said the other alternative for Byron's next race is Stephen Foster, I immediately say he's not running the Met. He's going to Churchill. So now you've lost Byron. You've lost Shared Belief. So now you're looking at essentially tonalist.
That's not official, is it?
Not official, but boy.
That's the way
one
the
of
wind's
those.
blown?
Well, whenever it comes out, all along the plan has been the Met Mile. And then 2 weeks before the race, you come out and say, well, it could be Stephen Foster the following week. I mean, the Stephen Foster's field is going to be considerably softer than what the Met's field is going to be.
I didn't realize the Met and the Foster were that close.
1 week.
Okay, yeah, I think
1
he's
week.
going to the Foster then. I think you're right.
So you're going to do that. Now you've got so you're looking at Tonalist, who's obviously capable.
Monster.
You're looking at Honor Code, who's capable at one turn.
Very good horse.
You're looking at Private Zone.
Tremendous horse.
After that, what do you got?
What's happening with Race Day?
Race Day
Coming
is
from
looking
the
at the
same-
Foster.
Okay, so he's not Met Mile.
No.
Interesting how the other Pletchers have diverted
Just
from
saying.
the Met Mile.
So we start putting things together. Where there may be a little bit of smoke, there's got to be a little bit of fire.
No, I like where you're going with that. I
Now,
like it.
If you had to make the call, round the horn, do you run him against the 3-year-olds? Again, he's raced 4 times, I think, in his career. 4 times. This is a very lightly raced horse. Do you go against the 3-year-olds where you're probably going to be 3-5? Or do you go in the Met against some really, really good older horses? Fornatale.
Like everything else in life, it comes down to economics. And the economics of getting a score in the Met Mile. This is a horse who I'm not predicting is going to have a 3-year career. This is probably it.
Yeah.
So this is your chance. You can get the for your value, you can get the equivalent of is it the Woody Stevens?
Woody Stevens.
You can get the equivalent of that several different places. There's only one Met Mile. I run in the Met Mile.
Yeah, the Met Mile is kind of the stallion maker. And if Pletcher feels like he doesn't have much time with this horse and he's got to make the races count, I think that's where you go.
Illman and I were talking about it. Now,
Where did you guys go?
well, you knowing me, I'm generally you don't need to rush this horse along. Give him time. This is the one where he and I parted, and he said go with the Woody Stevens because down the road you can go from that to the Haskell to the if it's too far you cut back to the King's Bishop, whatever. I think
That makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, complete sense. And he still may not run in the Met Mile. He may run in the Woody Stevens. I think you go now. And Dan's concern was if maybe there's a scenario where, boy, this horse, he's dusted all his other competition before, but now he's got to face legit Grade 1 older horses. They could just blow his doors off. And then not only have you possibly hurt him soundness-wise because you're trying to get him in against this, but boy, confidence-wise, getting your doors blown off. We've seen horses that sulk a little bit after they get crushed.
I think, doesn't Byron make all the difference? Doesn't Byron make all the difference for whether competitive edge runs? Because you figure you just go in, you take your weight advantage, and you send.
See, I don't think that way. Because I think they're much better off. I would, if I had it my way from a gambling standpoint and from a race shape standpoint, if I'm the connections here, Pletcher and company, I would rather Byron go because then he and Private Zone are going to go. I don't think Byron, we said it, I sound like a broken record. If he gets punched in the face, I don't think he wants to play anymore. And Private Zone, I don't think he wants a mile. So essentially, if you could be sitting just in behind them and inherit the lead at the top of the lane,
that's a good point.
you got to hold off Tonalist and Honor Code. Honor Code's probably still going to be at the gate by the time you guys hit the top of the lane because he just comes with that late run. I think you go in the Met, and the best part is you're probably going to get 10 pounds from your top
Is
competition.
it 10 that they
I would
get?
imagine it's got to be something astronomical.
Yeah, I was
right?
thinking it was 5 or 6. I can't
be.
remember from other years.
It can't be 5 or 6. Think about it. I mean, we're talking about multiple Grade 1 winners that are older against a 3-year-old who has got one Grade 1 to his name. That was
right.
as a 2-year-old.
The weight for age would just be 5 or 6. And
Yeah.
then the
It would
rest
I would
of it.
imagine it'd have to be the minimum 8, right? It would have to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's significant.
Now, the other reason I bring it up is, and Dan thinks it's a foregone conclusion, it very well might be. I mean, it's almost nearly impossible for something like this to not happen. My thought is, if he goes and wins the Met Mile, and American Pharoah doesn't win the Belmont. Now, American Pharoah's still a leader in the clubhouse for Horse of the Year, but now let's say they both go to the Haskell, and you beat American Pharoah in the Haskell. Or if we never see American Pharoah again after the Belmont, which is, let's be honest, unfortunately, it's a possibility.
Very real possibility. Probably
You go and
super real if he wins.
You win the Met, you win the Haskell. Now you can do whatever you want at Saratoga. If you want to go in the Travers, you want to go in the King's Bishop, then you've got races. You could go any number of ways after that. Horse of the Year isn't a foregone conclusion, I don't think, if this horse beats Older in the Met and American Pharoah loses the Belmont.
I agree. I mean,
Am I crazy?
No. He's going to have to really... We saw last year just how hard it is to unseat the horse that's won those 2 races, especially with a Grade 1 prep win as well. But you can't call it a foregone conclusion because, I mean, if he were to go on and beat him head-to-head then, and then go on and, say, win a Breeders' Cup race, that's going to be very hard to deny. It ain't likely.
No.
But it's...
And again, we got to go back and say we're talking about a horse with 2 screws in his leg already.
Right. So the idea of him having that kind of long he's going to have to earn it and then some to make it happen. We've seen from the voters that they're not going to let it be. They're not going to count those Grade 1s, the Preakness and the Derby. Just even though they're restricted, not only are they not going to be downgraded for being restricted to 3-year-olds, they're going to be upgraded by the voters for being the centerpiece of American racing.
Right.
You're going to have to do something special. But if you're talking about a campaign that in earnest for Horse of the Year starts with beating Elders in the Met Mile, that's the start of a campaign that sounds kind of special, potentially.
Mike, what do you think of Competitive Edge overall? Talent-wise.
Well, he's one that I had doubted even as a 2-year-old. It's hard to run those big numbers, and a lot of times we see horses that run those big numbers as 2-year-olds and don't really pan out later in their career. But he's impressed me. I mean, in every race, it seems like he's actually gotten better. So, I think the sky is kind of the limit for him, and I think that combined with knowing that they probably don't have a lot of races left in him, I think you're probably onto something. I think you got to take a stab. You take the weight. You see what you can do against the older horses. I don't see the point in cutting back to 7 furlongs, especially if you want to go longer, which I think they do later in the year. Other than just getting a race, an easy win, I don't see the point in it, to be honest.
Now, this goes to the second part of this thing. Where do you think he stacks up among the 3-year-olds?
Oh, that's so difficult. I feel like it's still kind of trying to compare apples and oranges.
Before I go into that any farther, I ran into Peter Rotundo Sr. on Sunday afternoon. Yeah. Out at Belmont? Or? No. We were
Did
down
you actually talk
Battery
horses?
Park. We did. A little
Okay.
bit. A little bit. Very little.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Very
it seems
little.
like
A lot of
he wants to
baseball.
talk about a lot of other things instead.
Well, I ignore the politics part. I don't
You
care
kind
about
of
politics.
have to.
Well,
He's
but
crazy.
because I don't care about politics.
Smart man.
Sorry, Mike Baychuk.
I root for Mike
Mike's a
Baychuk's
politics.
candidates.
That's right.
I root
That's
for
it.
his candidates.
That's all. He would love to see Rotundo Sr. Competitive Edge in the Belmont. Because he thinks that he could legitimately, and whether he ends up compromising himself, he thinks that he's the only one that can actually run with American Pharoah.
It makes sense.
The big problem is the distance.
Well,
right?
there's that, but the big problem is that Pletcher has never really seriously talked about that. And he's talked about that with 2 other runners in his barn. I don't think he makes a change at this point.
No. And I don't, it's not on the table. Let's make that clear.
It's a hypothetical.
He was saying in his ideal world.
Yeah.
You'd hate to see it if you were American Pharaoh. You'd
Right.
hate to see it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Now,
I wouldn't be worried about Carpe Diem.
For which reasons, though? Why would you hate to see it?
I'd hate to see it in case American Pharaoh was drawn inside of him. Like, if American Pharaoh was drawn outside, I suppose it wouldn't be that big a deal. But even then, to be worried about this fresh, very fast horse, that there's talk that he might be the best horse in the Pletcher barn, no mean feat, to have to worry about staying close enough to that one so he doesn't get away and having enough left in the tank to hold off the Frosteds of the world.
Is it more a concern of that you think he could beat him or that he could just compromise him?
I was thinking of it more as a compromise.
I think you could beat him. Potentially. I mean, I don't... If I'm Baffert and Zayat and Victor, I'm not really worried about the way this field is shaping up. That would worry me. You've got a lightly raced horse. The sky is the limit. I don't think we've seen the best of competitive edge. I think we've seen the best of materiality even. I think we've seen the best of Carpe Diem. I think we've seen the best of, all the other runners in that field. And so in order for any of them to win, I think you're going to need a regression from American Pharaoh. We might have it because, the Triple Crown takes a lot out of horses. I don't know if we've seen the best of competitive edge. That's the scary thing.
Well, that's just it. Now, Pete, you and I, Mike, you watch tape too, but I'm big with the gallop out. And a lot of people just, kind of poo-poo it, and that's fine.
I'm big on the gallop out.
But that's fine. Some people think it means a lot, some people don't. I thought this horse came to an absolute stop at the end of the Pat Day. Doesn't make me think that longer's necessarily better, but you got Super Saver. Super Saver, look, for as much as we can knock him for saying, he won the Derby, but never won another race after that, all of his babies are coming out running. All of them, top to bottom. I don't know how far this one's ever actually going to want to go, but I'm almost tempted to say I think he's better than American Pharaoh from a talent standpoint.
Really?
He's really...
Better than the undefeated 2-year-old champion who won 2 classics?
I've been blown away. Competitive Edge is the one where you sit and watch it. And you think, wow. Now, I'm not saying I don't think that was American Pharaoh. But there's something about this horse who did it. I don't know. There's something about... I think Competitive Edge from a talent standpoint. Now, dynamics, 1.5 miles, 1.25 miles, 1.25 miles, right? I don't know. I think Competitive Edge might be better than him.
That's
talent-wise.
There isn't a distance at which I would back Competitive Edge over American Pharaoh.
At a mile?
I would take American Pharaoh.
See, I think at a mile I would take Competitive Edge.
I mean, it becomes a conversation. I guess it becomes a conversation.
Right.
Price has to weigh in, though. Right?
Well, I was assuming just match race,
straight
pick
away.
a winner.
Yeah, pick a winner.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you want to give me 20-1, different.
Now, and that's the thing. I guess there's something about the thought of, and I'm going to be way in the minority here, if American Pharaoh wins the Belmont, he all but locks up Horse of the Year. I don't think there's really any argument with that.
Yeah, Horse of the Decade.
But that's what bothers me, though, because I think you could make the argument that if this horse were to beat, if he were to run in the Met and beat those other horses, his accomplishment, to me, would be almost as impressive.
As a whole Triple Crown?
I don't know how good any, I mean, I think the 3-year-olds are good. I don't really know. And who did he,
You love Competitive Edge, huh?
I think he's really good. I think he's really good. He's never really been challenged.
But I mean, who's he beaten exactly to be so excited about him?
Fair if you want to look at it like that. I mean, in that race down at Churchill, he faced Lord Nelson, who's okay. Faced Gimme the Loot, came back and was, I think, unlucky in that race down in Baltimore because the way the track's set up, he ran a monster race. He's won next out. I don't know if you're listening or you're taking notes. You just single him. He's not going to lose his next race after that because he had no shot with the way that track was. He was wide and made up a ton of ground.
Yeah.
I just think Competitive Edge is really good. If he showed it as a 2-year-old, like Mike said, you're always fearful. How often do we see real good 2-year-olds up at Saratoga not turn into anything? Happens pretty often.
It's an annual occurrence.
Havana.
Well, Havana, right. I mean, it's a good example. Just a horse that looked awesome.
Yeah.
And then, they just don't get any better. They're just precocious.
Yeah, right.
This one seems to continue to get better each and every time. And I think that's the most impressive thing. the concern has to be, soundness. How long is he going to be around?
I think of him as this is a comet streaking across the sky type of horse. He's going to be here and he's gone.
Very possible.
That's
so that's why you got to strike.
I think that's why, you 100% say we're all in.
Because his true value, you said go back to economics, his true value is in the breeding shed.
Right now it is, yeah.
No matter long term.
Well, you're right, true.
I mean, no matter Mile's a much bigger race from a breeding point of view than the Belmont is.
See, but I guess that's
not even close.
Right.
And I'm not saying it from the grand, the Triple Crown, obviously. 3 and 5 weeks, different tracks, different states, da-da-da. That's obviously going to take all the accolades.
Yeah.
For me, strictly from a racing standpoint, strictly the race standpoint, the more impressive race, the more impressive victory on that day would be this horse.
I don't disagree if you're talking about the Belmont isolated as a race. I think when you bring the whole, again, apples and oranges. But I think when you talk about the accomplishment and you talk about the Triple Crown as a whole, to me that's going to be, if that happens, and I'm hoping it will, that's an achievement that will be the racing achievement of the year.
And you know what the other thing is? And more, I could never really put my finger on it until the past few days about why I love the Triple Crown races. I think they get way too much emphasis, importance, the whole nine. Essentially, we're talking about 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like going out there, it'd be
it's like caring about the NCAA tournament and not caring about the NBA
and not caring about the older professionals. Where I look at it and say, I don't know what any of you are ever going to turn into. You're the flashy ones playing in the McDonald's All-American games.
Some of you won't even get jobs.
Some of you won't. Exactly. Yeah, right. You know what? But now I'm looking at a race like the Met where I know what I've got in tonalist. I know what I've got in private zone. I know I don't know what I have in honor code. Again, count me in the still jury is out on that one. But if you've beaten the proven commodities, that would be like a team coming from the NCAA tournament and going and playing the Golden State Warriors, and beating them, or being competitive with them,
I mean, it's not. I totally see where you're going. It's not a dead-on analogy because of how the sport of thoroughbred racing works and how much it's geared. Like the whole sport is geared towards, for right or wrong.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing for me.
These races
is that I don't think the whole sport, for the mass public, I understand it. It's something you can actually latch onto, and those names are going to be there more or less. For us in the business, it blows my mind when I hear so many people say, "Oh, well, he won the Derby." I don't care. It's a 3-year-old restricted race in May. What did you do after that? I just,
What you're saying isn't crazy. But before I had a job here, and before we did the podcast, and before I felt like part of my world was promoting racing, I said many times, I felt like the Triple Crown was almost like a glass ceiling for the sport. That by being so obsessed with these 3 races in 5 weeks by the 20-year-olds,
you can't move on.
That it's very hard for the sport to have other truly meaningful accomplishments on some level, and that the sport might be healthier if there was more of an emphasis, and I still do believe this, on the older horses, and I would think of ways to maybe tweak or change the Triple Crown. But I have to say this, the amount of sort of built-in audience for these races is just so tremendous. I feel like, I wish we had real stats on the podcast, but I would bet you that by far the Derby and Preakness ones bring in the most people. These races, instead of having to sell racing, these races sell themselves in a way where I've just, maybe out of convenience or what, I don't know, but I've just come to accept their preeminence in a way that I was resistant to before, if that makes any sense.
I feel like I've gone the other way. But I know what you're saying, though. Yeah. Where, this is clearly what was part of what got me into it.
Yeah. This is what people care about.
Right. But now more and more time goes by, and I look at it the big picture, not I don't know. I don't even want to say it like that because it makes it sound like I'm trying to spout off I know what I'm talking about.
No, I know what you're saying, though. It would be nice to have a little more of an emphasis on what horses do beyond the spring of their 3-year-old year.
It's like, all right, you guys are baseball fans and anybody that listens, it's like that big. It's not 10-0 show. That's a horse race. But there's the big Japanese baseball tournament,
Yes.
the high school tournament,
Yes.
that essentially it takes over the country for the 3 weeks that it goes on. And we've heard of all, Yu Darvish and Dice K and all of them. They all pitched in it. They pitched, 25 innings in 2 days, something crazy like that. But that's essentially what we're doing here with these horses, where I don't know. I just feel like there's too much. But you know what, though? That is in line with the industry right now, where it's all about 2-year-olds and getting them ready for the classics, getting them ready for these races. I don't know. I just think.
Koshian, is that term?
Something like yeah. You're right. That's exactly what.
And
it is.
I've made that same analogy actually. That's what it's like.
It just and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I just think that a horse. If this horse were to run in the Met, let's bring it full circle.
Sure.
If this horse were to run in the Met Mile and beat a horse like Tonalist, like Private Zone, like Honor Code, like anyone else that does run, if Bayern does run, I would almost look at that strictly from our standpoint, not the mass public standpoint. The mass public is going to look at it and say, "Cool, why didn't he run in the Derby?" When I'm going to look at that and say, I would argue that win would be more impressive than Pharaoh's individually, his Derby, his Preakness, or whatever happens is Belmont.
That's not crazy to me at all. I do think when you put the three together,
Sure.
it's pretty clear.
Sure, that's the one that's going to take, and whether I have a different, and it goes back to all the semantics of what actually is the horse of the year. Is it accomplishment or is it talent? Is it da-da-da-da? If this horse beats all those horses in the Met, I think I could make a legitimate case that he is more talented than American Pharaoh.
If Pharaoh wins, I think that's a tough thing to posit. If he loses, I think it makes sense.
We'll see. We'll see. Fingers crossed. We'll see if he shows up in the Woody Stevens.
Well, this is the question. When are we going to know? Is it not till entries?
Well,
is
I
it
would
going to cross
imagine-
enter?
no, I
It
would
probably come out in
a couple days, I would imagine. You've got to at least make some sort of. And
Hope
look,
he does
and
it.
that's even from a pub standpoint. I mean, that would at least, especially in the industry, that would get some people perked up, saying, "Oh, we've got a 3-year-old going up against the big boys here."
Make it a very exciting race. It would certainly help mitigate the defections of potentially Bayern. I wonder when
Right.
we'll hear about that
I
definitively
would
too. You
imagine
think the same
pretty
time
soon.
frame?
Yeah.
And certainly Palace Malice.
Before we wrap up for the day, just some quick news and notes. According to Mike Welsh, Carpe Diem didn't seem to be carrying much energy today. Didn't work out
Oh,
this
I didn't
morning.
see that.
Materiality doesn't look quite as good as he did before the Derby.
Wow.
Mub Tahij apparently is just they're working him out every other day at this point. I think he breezed a half mile 2 days ago, and then today they blew him out. Like he had a 3 furlong blowout just because he was
like 42.
well, but he more or less because he was feeling good. Like he wants to, I think leading up to the Belmont itself, there's going to be all sorts of very bizarre storylines and whatnot, and then all of it goes back to American Pharaoh, who apparently you can't find any one person that says anything wrong about this horse. He worked out this morning. Was it this morning?
Yeah,
Or
he
yesterday?
galloped. I don't know if
He worked 48 either today or yesterday.
Yeah, you didn't.
48 flat,
today.
ears up. Looks like the picture of health.
The professional, and this is interesting because I've seen some friends of mine on Twitter have pointed out, every year you hear connections say how good a horse is working, how well a horse did in their last work, and pointing out that the same could have been said of all the horses who won the first two and bombed in the third, and that's right. But the difference to me with American Pharaoh is we're not just hearing the connections talk about how great the horse looks. It's like you were, joking, but also serious, Matt, when you said it seems like it's everybody, but that everybody includes the Gary Youngs, the John Nichols, people spend millions of dollars on their word to buy horses, people who aren't people who have no reason to not be objective, at least in my mind, as to this horse, seem to think that he's come through unscathed. Will he be a bet in the win pool? Almost certainly not. Will there be maybe some clever ways to use him on Belmont Day? We'll talk about that next week.
And the other thing too, before we wrap, do you know? Is it Layden? the reporter for Sports Illustrated?
Tim Layden.
Is that his name?
There is a Tim Layden.
Yeah, he's been obviously covering the Triple Crown and whatnot, and he tweeted something earlier that he was next to Baffert for the workout. It had to be this morning. Was it this morning? I think
Maybe,
so.
I don't know.
He tweeted it that he was sitting next to Baffert as the work was going on, and Baffert said something along the lines of, he looks really good. He goes, we've got a really good chance if he stays this way. And that's coming from Baffert. Baffert's been down this road a couple times.
You would think he would be hedging a little more.
Yeah. So, again, fingers crossed we get there. Now we're on the final home stretch. We've got he's supposed to ship into Belmont, I believe, next Tuesday. So about a week from today.
Okay.
He's going to ship up here. I'm sure he'll just jog over the track. But
Tempting to go see him out.
we're
one
getting
of those
close.
Mornings.
We're getting close. Final thoughts before we wrap up for today?
I don't have much else to add. Well, actually, I will go back to what you guys were talking about in terms of the fascination with the Triple Crown races. I think part of it also goes back to the breeding end of the industry.
Okay.
That in terms of stallions and even in terms of getting runners, the industry is centered around 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds much more than around older horses.
No, that's a good point.
That's just
Fact.
yeah. And so that is part of the snake eating its own tail. I don't know if we're ever going to get out of that unless something changes from a breeding standpoint.
No, that's a good point.
And I'll make one other point on the back of that this is kind of a Debbie Downer point, but when your excellent Koshian, which I'm pretty sure is right, analogy, you think of all the young arms in Japan, you're a freak if you're a Darvish or a Matsuzaka,
right,
and you get through that and you can still pitch in the major leagues until, of course, they both had problems too,
right,
eventually, no doubt related to throwing 500 pitches when they were 17 years old. But sadly, that analogy is for horses
Holds
as well.
100%.
When you think about how many good horses, how rare it is to have a horse like Blame.
Yeah.
And how in so many hands, a horse like Blame, you never would have heard of Blame. Zenyatta wins 2 Breeders' Cup Classics easily because he goes through the meat grinder trying to get to the 3 Triple Crown races. And connections who are patient with these horses deserve, to me, a lot of praise to not fall into trying to push the square peg in the round hole.
That's why I predict that we'll never have another John Sheriff's Triple Crown runner.
No, I mean,
that is my bold prediction for today's podcast.
Hey, and really think about the horses, the big names that we've seen for multiple years in a row recently, the big ones. Zenyatta, she was a female. Even Havre de Grace, female. Game on Dude, gelding. Shared belief at some point he will continue. Gelding.
Yeah.
There's a reason.
Economics.
Economics. They're not going to go off to the shed.
Yeah.
And the mares can only have one a year. So on that note, Friday we'll come back. We'll do PH races. We'll go through some things, any news and whatnot that breaks. Be sure to take a look at live.drf.com and all the other stuff. But we'll go over it Friday. Pete, take it away.
May you win all your photos.